Welcome back to another video. In this one we're going to be talking all about spoon fishing for panfish. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Joel Nelson. He's going to share some good tips.
Popping a lot of holes here, and I tell you, really my strategy on ice, when I can afford to be, is to be efficient, and a big part of efficiency is a spoons first strategy. I start off fishing with spoons all the time because I really like to employ that active kind of bite, and I'm trying to entice fish to eat, and I'm chasing them around as much as they're chasing me. So drilling lots of holes, popping them in the beginning, that's kind of key to a good hole hopping strategy when you're fishing spoons first.
Now Joel's going to talk about jigging cadence, specifically how he's working that spoon versus how he would work similar baits for walleyes.
You know, a spoons first strategy certainly isn't something that's novel. If you talk to any walleye angler or perch angler, that's what they're going to be starting with too. But for panfish, it's amazing how well spoons can work and how overlooked they are. And Northland makes a ton of different spoons, by the way, and so many also in panfish sizes. So a lot of people sleep on their favorite walleye spoons, but can also fish them for panfish. But if you're going to be fishing those spoons, you're going to do it a little bit different for panfish than you will for predators like walleyes. So again, I'm not all that different from when I'm fishing just a standard small tungsten bait. I've got usually the rod locked up against my leg here. I do like bigger lifts and drops, especially when there's no fish on the screen. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. But for panfish, again, you're gonna treat them a little bit different than you would a walleye. Walleye, I'd probably be out here and I'd be like just pounding, pop, 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 really quick as the fish is nearby. With a panfish, I'm doing something similar, but I'm doing it in a much tighter fashion. I mean, just wiggling. You don't even want to think about tapping the rod blank. Instead, you're like almost just squeezing the grip, but doing it really quickly. A lot of that rod action that I'm trying to impart has to do with how I'm rigging my bait. If I'm fishing live bait, I tend to have a chandelier or just pile of different Eurolarva on there. And you can see the spoon itself is quite small in comparison to the way the bait is hung. A lot of people would think that that would turn away crappies or bluegills. Often it's just the opposite. It can attract them from distance, especially in clear water. They can see it from a long ways away. And then once they get there, it's a meal that challenges them and is worth their time to invest some energy in going after. So I don't think of spoons as something where you're almost, it's not like a ploy or it's not a gimmick. It really can be more effective. So for me, spoons first has a lot to do with challenging those fish, using bait, and running a cadence, a jigging style that promotes that bait dancing.
Sticking to the topic of jigging cadence, Joel is going to discuss a little bit how his cadence will change when he's fishing for crappies versus bluegills.
I think it's a gill, the way he's pounding and swimming in circles, yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. When it comes to bluegills, a lot of people don't think a smaller gill like this can actually eat a spoon, but they do all the time and do it quite easily. But I do employ a little bit different strategy with gills than I do with crappies. Crappies, when I'm jigging, quite often it's just a function of putting it in their face and raising it up above them. Those crappies love to eat up. They love to come up at a 45. If I do shake it at all, it's most often just to get fish that are out at distance to come in closer. But with bluegills, it really is more about the shake, like that fish right there. I really had to pound it real tight, you know, kind of lock down, make sure I'm just flicking it enough without, you know, kind of that gentle lift like I do for crappies. So that's really the difference. I work the bait less when it comes to crappies than I do for bluegills, mostly because I think that it works better for crappies to lift it less and move it less than it does for bluegills, which typically require it.
Next up, Joel shares a few additional thoughts and strategies when it comes to using spoons for panfish.
Here's a breakdown of my spoon box as pertains to panfish, and you can see there's two main sizes. I've got larger spoons that are pretty much dedicated towards crappie fishing, but amongst those larger spoons, I've got ones like the Ford spoon, which don't have a rattle in them. And then I've got like the buckshot coffin spoon and just standard buckshot spoons, which do have a rattle. And especially in these colors, in turbid waters that I fish, in the non-clear waters that I fish, these two spoons do a really good job for crappies. Just a little bit of rattle can make all the difference in the world in helping these fish find these baits. So I'm a big fan of the rattle baits and larger baits when it comes to crappies. And as you can see, I'm just a huge fan of the forward spoon in general. I think it could be Northland's #1 spoon that's just underutilized, doesn't get a lot of attention, but in the smaller sizes, it's exclusively a bluegill bait for me. And you can see the colors I have. You can see the hooks, perfect size for a bluegill. The size of the spoon itself does not overstimulate them, does not intimidate them. And I've got them in a variety of different fishy colors, but the pinks, the purples, kind of the hot perch there, some of the Wonder Bread colors I really like. They're definitely a favorite of mine when it comes to bluegill spoons, just because they do a great job of getting down to the fish quickly. I can hang, you can see all the crusty bits of Eurolarva here, but these are real in-action spoons for me, and I load these things up with a chandelier bait, drop it down, and the weight of the spoon combined with the near lightweight buoyancy of the bait that's on it really makes for a nice wiggle and action for those quality bluegills. You know, spoons, like I said, really get overlooked for panfish, but I'm a panfish spoon first kind of guy, and whenever I can go ahead and employ a more aggressive approach for panfish in general, I'm all about it. And spoons really check all the boxes when it comes to fishing efficiently. So often they don't need to have bait. With bluegills, I almost always run bait. With crappies, sometimes I'll tip with a minnow head, a tiny minnow head. A lot of times I'll fish it with just a chunk of flicker tail and plastic. So again, from an efficiency standpoint, they get down in the water column fast. They get to where the fish are at depth. You can fish them very quickly, whole hop bounce around. You can catch larger fish by challenging them that way. And I really am a spoons first panfish angler because of that. So go ahead, look in your walleye box, pick out some of your favorite spoons from a walleye perspective from Northland, and then go back and see if they offer them in smaller sizes, which so often they do. The buckshot coffin spoon, the bro bug spoon was a great one we didn't talk much about. The forage spoon, which is an all-time favorite of mine. Even the macho minnow spoon. So all of those spoons are in play for crappies or bluegills. Go check them out, find them in popular colors, employ them into your panfish strategy, and you're gonna catch more and bigger panfish because of it.
Next up, Joel's gonna share some of his thoughts on choosing the right rod when you're using a spoon for panfish.
You'll see I'm fishing a little bit different setup than a lot of people would fish for your standard panfish getup. Nice little fish. It's a longer rod to start with, and I do that for a couple reasons. I like using a longer rod to fish when I've got a jigging spoon on. Number one, for control, but number two, because I tend to be hole hopping, so I can be kneeling by the hole or I can be standing and jumping around. It's just a more active presentation, typically performed out in the open ice. This is a 32-inch St. Croix CCI Pan Dancer. It's great because it has just enough give in the tip to be able to detect those up hits and down hits, but also it's just stiff enough such that I can work a spoon like this and it doesn't overload the tip. So you need a rod that has those kind of characteristics, a little bit longer, springy such that you can detect the up hits when crappies especially come up from below, but not so springy that it overweights the entire tip and then it's like that. You don't want that because then you don't have any control in your jigging stroke. So it's kind of a specific rod to look for. It's counterintuitive to your typical 24, 28-inch tiny jig inline panfish with 2-pound test reel, rod and reel combination. Instead, this one's a little bit longer. I've got a spinning reel on it. I'm running 4-pound test. You know, it's just something that works a little bit better for running spoons anytime you're fishing for bluegills or crappies.
Now, one really underlooked aspect of ice fishing is how high in the water column you're working your bait. So Joel's gonna talk a little bit about when he likes to go high and when he likes to go low.
You know, when I'm thinking about spooning for panfish, I'm thinking about each species, predominantly crappies and bluegills, in a different way. I love fishing for crappies in clear water environments when I can, because I'm a real big fan of riding that spoon quite a bit higher than most people would fish, and I do that for a couple reasons. First and foremost, they can see it better, right? Silhouetted up against the ice, approaching from below, looking up. But second of all, you're also going to attract them in a better way. Crappies love to feed up, and it's just really well known that they eat up in a wonderful way, whereas bluegills, they can eat up as well, but they love eating down. So if I'm on a school of gills and I'm really trying to get them to go, they're being even somewhat finicky with the spoon, I love the fact that a spoon could really dredge up some mud. And bluegills specifically are going to eat a lot of bloodworms. They're going to eat a lot of things that are on the bottom. So it makes a ton of sense to use the weight of that spoon and the lead in it to drop down and kind of pound around in the bottom, kick up some mud, and make it look like a bloodworm kind of emerging, or a mayfly larva emerging from the bottom. I really think that that's a great tip for bluegills especially. So crappies I ride high, bluegills I ride low. Those are kind of some spooning secrets that'll really help you on a species specific kind of tact when you're spooning for them.
Now Joel is going to talk about some situations when he might go away from the spoon when he's chasing panfish.
You know, so often the question is when not to spoon. I always start with spoons, but there are times when the fish tell me not to fish spoons, and it can be as simple as just like, you're not catching fish, but more importantly, you want fish to see the spoon and visibly react in a negative way. Underwater camera, it's super simple to see this. Big bluegills especially, they'll come up to it, or they'll see it from afar, and they love all that commotion. They see it from afar, and then they come up to it within a couple inches, and they're like, whoa, right away, you know their fish, their body language is negative, and they scream away, right? When it's crappies, they won't always give you a great cue. A lot of times crappies, rather than swimming away quickly or, you know, kind of racing off, they just are generally disinterested. They're just kind of floating around, and they'll never really get that close to the bait. They'll never really address it and come below it like they're gonna eat it. Boy, that's a sure sign that you need to be switching away from a spoon. So often that coincides with the time of year. Early ice is a great time to be fishing spoons. I don't care whether you're fishing bluegills or crappies, perch, whatever. Panfish and spoons go together hand in hand, early ice. You get to the middle part of the winter, and sometimes, unless fish are really active, maybe a early morning or late at night feeding window, you need to be switching away from them. Or you can utilize spoons, especially rattle spoons, as an approach to draw fish into your spread, but just realize that you're probably not gonna catch fish with them. They might be attracted to the commotion and the flash, but they're not gonna tolerate eating something that's that large of an offering. So really, those are the only times I don't use spoons, and even when I don't use them, sometimes I still use them to attract fish.
Well, that's about all we got for you in this one. Special thanks to Joel for sharing a bunch of really good info. And if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to hit that little red subscribe button down below. So we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.